Hi guys, this is Renee Rockwood, also known as Nani Knits, and I am here with Blue Jean Baby so I can show you how to bead on a purl bump. Beading on a purl bump is really important for this pattern because it allows the bead to be completely centered in the middle of that cable. So you can see here that it is completely centered in the middle of that cable. Sometimes with certain beading techniques, it'll appear on one leg of a stitch or the other. And so while it works really well in a lot of patterns, for this one, I just figured the super centered nature of the pattern needed to have a super centered method of beading. So without further ado, let's go ahead and show you how to bead on a purl bump. So how you bead on a purl bump, it's worked across two rows. The first row, you place the bead, and then the second row, you lock the bead in. So in order to do that, we have to have our beads stranded onto the yarn so that we can place the bead at the ready. I've got a bead at the ready here, and I like to kind of keep it nearby so that when I'm ready to bead, I can. So we're gonna make it to the stitch that we need to place our bead on, which is the center of the cable. So I'll work my 2 cable knits, and then I'll be ready for my purl. So what I wanna do is I wanna make sure that the bead is not too close, because if you have it too close here, it's not going to actually wrap around the needle when you, well, it will maybe, but it's less likely to wrap around the needle, and sometimes you can end up getting it stuck on the wrong side of your work, and it just is not very good to snug it up too close. You'll end up having more trouble with it than it's worth. So likewise, you also don't want to have it too far, because then you won't be able to reach it when you need to. So I like to put it about this distance. It seems to work pretty well for me. So when you're ready to purl, you're gonna go ahead and bring your yarn forward like you normally would, and you're gonna purl as if you normally would. But when you're wrapping the yarn around, you want to make sure that that bead goes with you through the loop. So bring that bead with you through the loop, and once you do, you'll notice that the bead should freely move around the upside of the needle. That's how you know it's done correctly. So I'm going to repeat that a couple of times, and then I'm going to show you how to lock it in. So bead at a decent distance away. You're gonna bring your yarn forward, go in to purl, and now what happens if the bead doesn't quite go through? If you're a little too far away when you go in for the purl, then the bead's not gonna reach all the way through. Now you can kind of force it through, but to me that's kind of a pain. So what I do is I'll just go back and reset it to make sure that it wraps around correctly. Okay, so I'm there, and I'll let it come through, and then we can see it moves well. Okay, so one final time. Okay, so there's my regular knit stitch. I'm going to bring my yarn forward, go in to purl. Bead should go through the purl loop, and then we'll put the yarn back in the back and move on to our next stitches in the cable pattern. So we can see again that bead works freely through, and we're able to move on to the next round. So you'll knit around, make it back to your cable. I have a second sock set up just for this purpose. So I'm going to make it back to my bead. And once I reach my bead, this is where we do the lock-in phase. So how to lock it in is you're going to bring your yarn forward and you're going to go in and you're going to purl as if you normally would purl. Oops, I did a little bit of something funky on that. Okay, sorry. You're gonna purl as if you would normally purl. And then the most important part is not how you purl, but how you bring the yarn back around. You want to make sure that when you go into purl and you return the yarn to the back, you do not want the yarn to be to the right of the bead. If the yarn is to the right of the bead, then it's going to end up vertical on the left side, on the left leg of the stitch. If you make sure that the yarn is on the left, then it will center on to that horizontal portion of the purl bump. Okay, so I'm going to show you again. So when we go into purl, we just want to make sure that when we bring that yarn back, that we're wrapping it around the bead so that it's to the left of the bead. Go again. Purl, and then bring the yarn to the left of the bead. And then once you work in your next stitch, you can see that it's actually on that horizontal purl bump. So I'll try to go a little bit closer. Okay, so purl, and then bring the yarn to the left of the bead before you go in and knit. And that's it. Your bead is now centered on your purl bump, and it will appear directly in the middle.